All right, welcome to Touchdown Talks. I'm Spencer Taylor. Before I go any further with this, want to wish all those who celebrate happy Thanksgiving, and I hope you're enjoying your Black Friday as well. Just happy holidays to all. Stay safe. Hope you're enjoying, and especially if you're here, assumably you're a football fan. So I hope you've been enjoying the football content we've been getting, both the three Thanksgiving games that we got, followed by today's Black Friday game between the Las Vegas Raiders and the Kansas City Chiefs. All some pretty fun games, some more than others, and depends on who you ask. But obviously, based off what I'm wearing and who I am, you can probably tell where I might be going with this, as there's also some breaking news, so that is what this video is going to be about. But before I proceed any further, I do want to remind you, please don't hesitate. Hit subscribe, hit the notification button. That way you don't miss any future videos from this channel. I cover the NFL as a whole, and then, particular teams, whatever. It just depends on what's going on currently, both during the season and during the off season. That'll all be here. And really, if you leave things down in the comments, you converse with me. Love to have conversations down there with you. Anything you want me to cover, I'll do that. Lists, news, whatever it may be. That's the goal here. And so the goal in this video is, of course, to update you on the breaking news that broke this morning, the firing of head coach Matt Eberflus from the Chicago Bears. Bit of a surprise, also not much of a surprise in two different senses. First of all, as far as Coach Eberflus getting fired by the Bears, not too much of a surprise, something that I'm pretty sure most of us, if you've been watching the NFL, if you've heard anything about the Chicago Bears over this last year or so, you probably knew that they were headed towards, their head coach being fired, some changes being made eventually, at least, if nothing else, by the end of this season. And the reason that this could be considered a surprise, however, is that the Chicago Bears have never before in their 100-plus year history as a franchise, they have never, during the season, fired a head coach. They have always waited till the end of the season to take care of business like that. They've always let coaches coach to the end of a season. So Matt Eberflus, the very first coach that the Bears have ever decided to fire before the conclusion of a season. So in that sense, it is a bit of a surprise. No matter how loud the noise might get around Chicago, big media, lots of fans, both in Chicago and Chicagoland, as well as nationwide, including myself, obviously, not from Chicago, but big Bears fan. And again, if you saw my previous video, finally got to go to Chicago recently, but it's, not been the greatest year, or really the last few years, for the Chicago Bears. So I do want to quickly go over, just a little bit of how the Matt Eberflus era as the head coach for the Bears has gone, to kind of paint a picture as to why the Bears, the writing was on the wall. They needed to move on. Some, including myself, would have argued they should have moved on following last season, should have hired a new head coach in January of 2024. Of course, if they could have, I would have really liked that to have been Jim Harbaugh, but tons of rumors and possibilities as to why they didn't do that. One being that the Bears' current president used to be big in college, didn't work out, didn't get along there with Jim Harbaugh. And also, Jim Harbaugh may have required a bigger price tag than some head coaching candidates would. And the Bears, as far as ownership goes, don't have the most money to spend on coaches. So they've started to become known as being a bit cheap when it comes to hiring coaches. So just looking at the Matt Eberflus era as the Bears head coach, he finishes his time with the Bears with a overall record of 14-31. So not a great record at all. On the road, it gets even worse. That's where the biggest issue was. On the road, he finished with a record of 3-19, including the game yesterday on Thanksgiving. I'm sure you probably saw or heard of that and what happened there. So 3-19 on the road overall, and then on Sundays, specifically Sundays, he finished with a record on the road of 0-18. So that's obviously not acceptable at all. And then just win percentage overall, all time, he ranks 217th out of 229th in history. So that's horrible. Obviously, that's not a good ranking there in win percentage. And then trailing at halftime, anytime the Bears trailed at half, the Bears ended out 5-22 in those games. In one-score games, Bears ended 5-17 in those. Many of those coming this last, really basically 6 of those this last 6 weeks have been a big part of that. And then just within the division, against the Vikings, the Lions, the Packers, which admittedly, certainly this year and recently, obviously the Packers have always been a tough team. The Lions, this most recent few years, they've become a tough team. And even the Vikings, every so often they're really good, including this year. So tough gauntlet, but if you want to have any success in the NFL, you got to have at least some level of success against your own division. And the Bears under Matt Eberflus just were not getting that. So under Matt Eberflus, they finished with a record of 2-14 over this last 2.5 years in the division. And then going up against winning teams, just teams that have a record of above 500, the Bears went 1-14 under Matt Eberflus. So obviously something had to be done eventually. Again, I would have argued that it should have happened last season, not this season, especially being that you were bringing in Caleb Williams. Everybody knew the Bears were going to be bringing in Caleb Williams, so it would have made more sense and been more smart in the interest of developing him to have made a head coaching change last season before bringing Caleb in, bring in an offensive head coach like a Jim Harbaugh or somebody else for that matter. You could have brought in the Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, someone else, somebody that had a better potential to develop Caleb Williams as a star quarterback. And so, head scratching move there, but whatever. We can't go back, change the past. And again, with the Bears' history, wouldn't have been surprised if they had held on to Matt Eberflus and let him coach out the rest of the season. But obviously, with really the way this last 6 games have gone, just I think one too many humiliating losses and very close finishes that just did not go the right way for the Bears. And some of them, including the game yesterday on Thanksgiving, some moments that were a bit questionable from the coaching side of things. So just didn't paint a good light for Eberflus. I mean, tough situation for him as well, but also in a lot of the interviews after some of these decisions, some of his responses were ones that certainly people in the media and fans didn't love. I have no idea exactly how those responses weighed on the ownership's decision, but just some responses that for the most part were defensive of the decision and reinforcing that if he could go back and do it again, he would. Those same things, which is kind of like, well, all right, how are we supposed to have confidence in you going forward? So the Bears do make a move. Now, I do want to, before I move on past Eberflus, I do want to say, though, not all the blame is on Matt Eberflus for how things have gone. There's plenty of blame to be placed on the players as well. They haven't played perfectly, but I would argue certainly, for example, Caleb Williams, rookie quarterback, sure, has he played as good as some might have hoped, including myself, of course? No, but he has really most of this season, pretty much every week, he's shown incremental growth. Really, that first 6 weeks or so, he was improving. Then they had that stint of about 3 games where Caleb really got into a rut. And then once they made the offensive coordinator change to Thomas Brown, that seemed to help Caleb a little bit. And since then, he's been, as far as personally, he's been improving. in his performance, but the Bears have still been losing nonetheless. And so, he's been improving. The offense, again, not putting up a ton of points for modern football, but improving this last few weeks. The defense, to Matt Eberflus's credit, that's really the one thing that he could hang his hat on this last year and a half or so, really this last year, I would say. Defense has looked good in many categories. They've been top 10 this season, or even top 5 at some points. But again, when your overall record as a head coach for the Bears, 1-14, that's going to get you fired. But again, I want to move on to the other problem, which is ownership. I've talked about this a week or two ago when I talked about the Bears making changes when they fired the offensive coordinator. Really, a lot of this goes down to the ownership, and I do have a graphic for that as well this time. George McCaskey talked about it. He is the grandson of the Bears founder, George Halas, and under McCaskey, who has been the Bears chairman since 2011, the Bears are 0-2 in the playoffs. They've only made the playoffs twice, both times losing in the wild card. And then overall, just regular season record, the Bears are 93-130 under George McCaskey, so a losing record by far there. And then as far as just, people in charge that have been under George McCaskey, 3 general managers, that's still the current number. And then as you'll see on this graphic, I've got asterisks by the next few numbers just because of the changes that are happening. So under George, they've had 5 head coaches. That's only counting up to Matt Eberflus. So if you count Thomas Brown, who is going to be the interim head coach going forward this season, you could really say that's 6. Offensive coordinators, that number was up to 10, including Thomas Brown this last 17 days. And really, if you wanted to, whoever's going to replace him for this next month and a half or so, if anybody, that number goes up to 11 already. If nothing else, it goes up to 11 in 2025. And then defensive coordinator, they've had 7. It's quite possible with Matt Eberflus leaving. Maybe that changes. I'm not 100% sure on that. Quite possibly the defensive coordinator stays. But still, at least by 2025, that number is going to go up as well. So 3 general managers, 5 head coaches, 10 offensive coordinators, and 7 defensive coordinators coming into, the game yesterday. That's where those numbers were at. And that's, again, all those in just about 13 years. So that, really not very good numbers there for George McCaskey. Just, not great leadership. Again, it's comes down to all sorts of factors, who they've chosen to hire as head coach, whatnot. But either way, moving forward, at least from now until the beginning of January, what do the Bears do for the rest of the season? They have promoted Thomas Brown yet again. So within a matter of 7 days, Thomas Brown has gone from the passing game coordinator for the Bears to the offensive coordinator, and now he will be the interim head coach. And so he's had quite a skyrocket of promotions in a very short amount of time. So just really quick, I was curious about his background, so just want to give you a little background on Thomas Brown and who he is. Again, was the Bears' offensive passing game coordinator to start this season. Before that, he was a running back for the University of Georgia, was an all-SEC tailback as a freshman, and then was drafted in the 6th round of the NFL draft in 2008 by the Falcons. He played in 3 seasons for the Falcons and then for the Browns. In those 3 seasons, he didn't record any stats. And then after retiring from the NFL, he went pretty much straight into coaching, coached in the college ranks for a good bit, and then he went to the LA Rams and was under Sean McVay from 2020 to 2022 as a running backs coach, and then tight ends as well for the Rams. And then from there, he went in 2023. He was with the Carolina Panthers. He also served as the interim offensive coordinator for the Panthers last year during that lame duck period. And then, of course, 2024 came to the Bears. So that's kind of the quick background on Thomas Brown. And again, at least as far as the offense is concerned, and Caleb Williams, they've looked better this last couple weeks under him. So it'll be interesting to see what the Bears look like going forward. Obviously, at this point, at 4-8 this season, their max potential would be 9-8, and I don't think in the NFC, I don't think that's going to be even enough for a playoff berth, even at 9-8. It's possible. I mean, if they did go 9-8, again, this is like 0.1% chance of happening, in my opinion. But let's say the Bears go 9-8, they win out. That will mean they will have beat the Vikings, Lions, and Packers at least once. They will have beat the 49ers, the Seahawks. So, there's quite a bit of a gauntlet to get through there. So going undefeated in that, likely pretty impossible under an interim head coach. And that's what I'm saying. Even then, although they aren't technically mathematically eliminated yet, they're pretty much out of contention. So really, they're just going to be fighting for teammates, fighting for your coaches, and we'll have to see. I will say, admittedly, another concern I do have for the Bears is, it's tough. As a fan, it's hard to know what to cheer for at this point because, again, Bears pretty much out of contention at this point. Sure, they're not mathematically eliminated, so yes, there's a very slim chance if they basically went out and things go just right for the Bears, maybe they sneak into the playoffs as the number 7 seed. But again, what I've been saying most this season, based off of just looking at my predictions and other predictions for the other teams in the NFC North, I don't think 9-8 is even going to be enough in the NFC to get into the playoffs. So, again, and that's even if you go 9-8, which being 4-8 right now, that's pretty much impossible to do even that. So, you're out of playoff contention, so what do you do? I mean, again, you can still win games just to win games. You can play spoiler, big, and obviously players and coaches that are still there, they're going to still be playing their best. They're still going to be coaching their best that they can, whether it's just for pride right now, for contract reasons, stuff for the future, obviously. So I do want to see that. Obviously, I want to see improvement from Caleb Williams as much as possible. Some improvements in, chemistry between him and DJ Moore. I'm very curious to see how the defense is going to react. With Eberflus, the defense, that was his thing. That was the thing he was good at before being hired as the Bears coach. So I'm curious to see how the defense is going to be impacted. They've been playing top 10 in a lot of categories this season. So it'll be interesting to see where the Bears defense goes this next few weeks and how those players respond. There's a lot of good players on the defense as well. But my concern is with the interim head coach thing. It's not that I want the Bears to lose. Obviously, if they lose, they get a better draft position. That's kind of the weird trade-off as a fan. At this point, do you cheer for your team to lose to get better draft position? Do you cheer for a win? And again, I think a lot of fans usually choose to go for, I still want entertaining games. I still want to see my younger star players on my team to do well and improve, but I won't be too sad if we lose and, keep helping our draft position. I think that's the position that many fans might at least secretly go for, even if they're not willing to admit it. Again, obviously the organization, especially the players and coaches, shouldn't. Front office, that's a different story. The front offices will at least quietly start acting like that. But my thing is if you look at historically for the NFL, anytime teams have fired a coach partway through the season and they've had an interim head coach, the best example and recent one would be the Las Vegas Raiders. It's not uncommon for teams that get an interim head coach. It's not uncommon to, at least for a week or two, get a spike where, players and everybody on the team, really get focused, get, some sort of a morale boost or something. And, maybe you get an upset win or two in those first couple weeks with the interim head coach. Maybe things change just enough that you're able to trick your next opponents on film. I don't know what it is, but this is what happened with the Raiders. They upgraded Antonio Pierce to the interim head coach. They won a couple games that were pretty close, pretty fun. As a matter of fact, one of them was last year against the Chiefs. They won that under Antonio Pierce. It was a huge celebrations for the Raiders and for their fans. And then partially because of that, you could argue, Antonio Pierce, by the end of last season, the Raiders decided, hey, let's just, rather than doing a coaching search or whatever, the players really seemed to rally around him. We got a burst of energy, upset the Chiefs on Christmas is what it was, as a matter of fact. Let's just hire Antonio Pierce. Let's see how it goes for, going forward. Let's see how that goes. And, obviously the Raiders are missing a lot of pieces. I'm not saying they've got a great roster, but I can't say that so far things for the Raiders under Antonio Pierce have looked that great. And again, that's just one example. That's just the most recent example I could pull off of that most fans now that might be watching this video, you might be able to kind of remember some of those games and, know what's going on with the Raiders right now. But there's other examples, many of them very similar to that. Interim head coach comes in, team gets a slight boost, maybe they win a game or two, and then it causes a dilemma for that team in the offseason of, rather than just jumping right into interviewing guys to bring them in, now we have to decide, do we just keep the guy that we had as the interim head coach? Do we just make him the official head coach going forward? And just historically, that hasn't worked out for teams and just doesn't really go well in the end. Again, you get that little boost when they're the interim head coach. Maybe even get a little boost at the start of the season, their first official year as head coach. But then after that, again, historically, just hasn't worked out. And so that's my concern for the Bears, especially that, again, they do have a reputation of being cheap when it comes to coaches. It's a franchise that also has no experience with firing a head coach mid-season. So, I'm nervous that, let's say the Bears, they play the 49ers next in about 10 days from now on December 8th. Let's say the Bears go to San Francisco and they get an upset win there. And then, again, you got still 3 more division games. You got a game against the Seahawks on Thursday night. Let's say you beat the 49ers this upcoming week, who are struggling, but they're still the 49ers. So the Bears beating the 49ers in San Francisco, that would still be a pretty big story under interim head coach for his first game. So that would be a huge story if the Bears got the upset there. Let's say they do it, and also Caleb looks pretty good. And then maybe either the final game against the Packers at the end of the season, maybe the game against the Seahawks, or, Vikings or Lions. Maybe you beat one of them. Just 2 upset wins out of the next 5 games for the Bears. I wouldn't be surprised if there's enough hype and buy-in from fans and from players that maybe the Bears just decide, all right, yeah, we'll just keep Thomas Brown. He'll be cheaper than anybody else we could get. Again, you get somebody you already know that's in the building. And again, if that happens, so be it. If that happens, I hope it works out, obviously, as a Bears fan. But again, I would like to see the Bears, and let's say the Bears do really well, win. Again, I would like to see more than 2 upsets. Again, if they somehow magically go undefeated the rest of the season, or even they get 3 wins out of the next 5, especially, maybe one against the Packers or the Lions, some really good wins. Maybe by then I'll be ready to eat my words and I'll say, okay, I'm down with keeping Thomas Brown. Let's see how it goes. But again, that's me as a fan. I might be getting, if that happens, I might just be getting kind of tricked into it. Again, the history doesn't bode well for hiring an interim head coach going forward for the next season. So I just, if it doesn't go super amazing, Caleb isn't like super amazing going forward, I would like to see, again, nothing against Thomas Brown, but I would like to see this offseason the Bears go off after a Ben Johnson or somebody else that is a offensive-minded head coach that the Bears are confident, they can feel confident will develop Williams and that can work with him. So we'll just have to see. I hope you've enjoyed. Thank you for watching this far. Enjoy the rest of the football content we've got coming up Sunday and Monday, as well as college football if you enjoy that as well. Enjoy all that, and I will see you in the next video.